The thing I disagree with, though, is that the primary intention of a firearm is to kill something.
Well, not necessarily. That's interesting. The primary intention of a firearm is actually to protect what you love. The primary intention...
I disagree with that, but...
That's okay.
The equivalent of saying the primary intention of a firearm is to kill something, the reason people have firearms is just in case something happens.
Hey, Charlie, how's it going?
Hey, we got the Harris Wall sticker. Welcome up.
Real quick, I just want to say that I heavily agree with what you said about neutrality in the classroom. I think that's a brilliant standpoint, and I, as an ed major, I agree with that. Before I get to like the nitty gritty, go dogs, horns down. Anybody? Yeah? Yeah?
We can agree. We should just stop. We agreed way too much. You're creeping me out, man.
My bad. So I'm going to talk about some gun control stuff. Do you mind if I give you some statistics first?
Yeah, fine.
All right, awesome. So in the United Kingdom, there was the Dunblane Massacre in March 13, 1996. It was a school shooting. 17 people were killed. 15 were injured. Following that massacre, it is probably the biggest massacre in UK history, involving schools specifically. There was a ban on all handguns. Since then, there's been no school shootings in the UK, and it averages 28 firearm homicides a year. In the United States, there are 39...
I hate arguments like this, bro. The UK, they be stabbing people up like it's a Chucky movie or something. Like it's Friday the 13th every single day. They be walking around with machetes. They be walking around with machetes in the UK. Literally, they walk around with machetes. And they be throwing knives at each other like freaking ninja stars. Like it's Ninja Assassin or something. Like it's Mortal Kombat. They be throwing knives and daggers at each other. But nonetheless, we're watching a student try to get rid of the Second Amendment because that will solve all the gun issues. Every time I hear a debate like this, and I know guns obviously were designed to be dangerous, and they were designed to either protect, or some people use them to not protect. They use them to cause harm. Nonetheless, guns don't harm people naturally. People harm people, and they use guns as the weapon or the tool to do so. But even in America, this argument is not really fair because cars kill more people than guns ever could. Cars take most of the lives in the United States, but you don't hear anyone trying to ban cars because they know cars are a tool. Cars are used to better or to aid our lives. The same way as weapons. Weapons are used to aid our lives. Weapons are used to protect people. They're used to save lives. We just have some bad people who use them to take lives. And also, a lot of the people who use guns to take lives don't even get guns legally. Their guns aren't even legal weapons. They're illegal weapons that they somehow are getting. I don't even know how they're getting these weapons. They're illegal. They have illegal attachments on the weapons. So if you take away the Second Amendment, if you overturn it, you're just taking the guns from the people who actually want to protect it. Because getting a gun is not easy. You have to register yourself. You have to register the weapon. The bullets have like fingerprints on them so they know what guns they're shooting out of. It's a very tedious process to own a firearm legally. Why would you take it from them and not the people who are actually doing the harm illegally? But let's continue.
707 gun deaths in 2019 alone. The average of one gun-related death every 11 minutes. In 2023, there were 346 school shooting incidents in the U.S. So far, there have been 385 mass shootings in 2024, and a mass shooting is defined as an incident in which 4 or more people are injured or killed. Why are you pro-Second Amendment, and can you give me your stance on that?
Great. So I just want to make sure I can know where you're coming from. Do you believe owning a firearm is a right or a privilege?
I believe it's a privilege. I'm going to go with that.
Okay, so then you do not believe in the Second Amendment as it is written?
No, I believe it needs to be amended. I believe in a ban for guns.
Okay, so that's where we disagree, and that's okay. We have clarity but not agreement. I believe that the right to protect yourself and your family against a tyrannical government or a home invader is an inalienable right that must be protected and that no one can take it away. Now, and that's okay, we have clarity on that. Mm-hmm. Now, let's go through why I believe that and some clarifying statistics. Yeah. Everything you said is true, but one part of it is misleading. Is that, yes, there are about 30,000 gun deaths a year, or death by firearm, but 2/3 of them are death by suicide.
Yes, yeah.
Right? So it's a little misleading to say 30,000 or even every 11 minutes. And so there's some people that say, well, it's easier to commit suicide if you have a gun in the house. You and I would both agree, though, that if someone is committing suicide with a firearm, there's other underlying issues. The firearm is secondary.
Absolutely.
Okay, so that's a reason. Thank you for agreeing with that.
Yes.
Okay, so therefore that gives you about 10,000 gun deaths a year. The vast majority of those are gang-related in about 10 cities across the country. Mm-hmm. Not excusing it, but there's other underlying factors associated with it. Now, let's get into what our position is, those of us that believe in the Second Amendment. We fully acknowledge that when you have liberty, that you're going to have sometimes undesirable outcomes. For example, there are 50,000 people a year that die in auto fatalities, and it's tragic. However, no reasonable person would come up to the mic and say, let's ban driving.
True. The one thing I disagree with, though, is that the primary intention of a firearm is to kill something.
Well, not necessarily. That's interesting. The primary intention of a firearm is actually to protect what you love. The primary intention...
I disagree with that, but...
That's okay. So let's actually... The firearm is a technology or...
The equivalent of saying the primary intention of a firearm is to kill something, the equivalent of that is saying, well, the primary defense of working out or learning how to box or do jiu-jitsu or karate or MMA is to destroy somebody's limbs and break their arms and bash their face in. That's not necessarily true. The reason people have firearms is just in case something happens. Just in case someone breaks into my family's house in the middle of the night, I know that I'll be able to protect myself. I'll really be able to protect myself and defend what's mine. Just in case someone threatens my livelihood on the street, if you take boxing or you take MMA or you wrestle, the reason you do these things is so that you have the capabilities of defending yourself. You don't have to depend on outside factors to make sure that you can live to see another day. That's why people own firearms. That's why people learn to fight. That's why people do these things. It's not so that they can go out and inflict damage on other people. And I think the statistics would side with me on this. I don't think the majority of firearm owners, I know the majority of firearm owners have never shot anyone. I know they haven't. But they don't look at those statistics. They don't look at legal firearm owners, responsible gun owners like that. They look at the small percentage of people who may have even gotten their guns illegally, and they just factor them all into this big, strange movement to ban weapons.
A tool that is actually intention neutral, right? So a firearm could be used for sharpshooting, or it could be used for a massacre. No different than a kitchen knife can be used for cook a beautiful meal, or to, murder somebody. So it's a piece of technology, albeit it makes killing easier, but it in itself is not inherently what you might think it is. Now, let me just finish the point, though, is that we as enthusiasts for the Second Amendment acknowledge that in a free society, people are going to do bad things and dumb things, but there is a price to liberty. And this is a mature viewpoint that we lost during COVID. During COVID, as a country, we said, we don't want liberty, we want safety, and everybody stay at home 15 days to slow the spread. And how many of you guys wanted the lockdowns to end after like 2 weeks, right? And so what we get at, though, with firearms is that we acknowledge that there will be unnecessary deaths. We acknowledge that we want to try to limit those. We could talk about that. Yeah. But in a culture that believes that owning a firearm is a right, not a privilege, our goal should be about limiting the suffering, but acknowledging that you're not going to get rid of it completely. It's a different viewpoint than the European model. The final point I'll say is, why do you think we believe it's a right? It's because we believe that, God forbid, if the government ever becomes tyrannical, we need an ability to defend ourselves against a tyrannical government. So please, your thoughts on this.
Yes, absolutely. So there's two things I want to touch on. The first is being the context of the Second Amendment during its creation. Obviously, the Constitution was written in 1776.
It was 1787, and the Bill of Rights was 1791, but that's okay.
Yeah. Anyways, so back then, the average, an experienced shooter on a musket could fire 3 shots a minute. All right, on average, it took 30 seconds to fire 1 shot. Modern day AR-15s, traditionally, if it's a stock model, holds about 30 rounds in a magazine. Now, you can customize that and make it carry more, sure, but the staggering statistic is that these AR-15s can empty this 30-round magazine in 5 seconds, is the possibility.
So that's totally correct. The question is, what was the founders' intent when they put the Second Amendment? For example, to play out, and I'm not trying to pick on you,
no,
but for example, you say the founders only want or thought that, okay, musket Second Amendment. Did they only think First Amendment, parchment and paper, not Twitter?
I love this argument because one thing that I want to point out in this whole debate is something called the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, and I'm going to show it on the screen here. So if you notice, the hierarchy of needs has 5 levels. There's self-actualization, self-esteem, social safety, and physiological. So physiological needs are obviously water, food, air, the things that we need. If we do not get this, we will literally die within minutes or days. The second level is safety, meaning that we need housing. We need to be able to protect ourselves. We need to feel safe. We need to feel like we can defend ourselves if anything were to happen. The next level is social, where we need family, friends, social belonging. We want to play. We want to talk. We want to go to events. And then the other ones are self-esteem. We want to feel secure in ourselves. And then self-actualization, where we want to just feel very authentic within ourselves. The reason I'm bringing this up is because firearms are a second level need, or the purpose of firearms, which is kind of neutral, but the reason the majority of people get firearms, which is safety, is a second level need. And where this student is operating from is third level. He's operating from social things like, oh, it's not safe as a society. We don't need this. It's not good for us anymore. He's operating from social. But the majority of other people are operating from safety, where we're looking at it from, this is a safety need. This is not about whether we want to have it or we don't want to have it. This is about us protecting ourselves and our family just in case something happens. And I think that's why there's a disconnect between people who support the Second Amendment and people who don't support it. The people who do support it are looking at this from the perspective of, this is for me to protect myself. I don't really care about any other purpose of a firearm other than to protect myself. And the people who are against it are not even looking at it from that perspective, because they've probably always lived a pretty safe life. I don't know. But that's a big thing I wanted to touch on a little bit.
If the Second Amendment was only intended to cover muskets, is the First Amendment only intended to cover letter writing, not talk on the internet?
That's a good point. But here's the thing.
Meaning these principles transcend technology. And that's where we come from, is that you have a First Amendment right whether you're speaking freely on a message board or if you're just talking like the Founding Fathers would. You have a Second Amendment right whether it's a musket or whether it's an AR-15, because the principle and the truth that undergirds it, and I'll let you in a second,
yeah, for sure,
is transcendent above the technology.
So I'm going to use your logic a little bit. When the Constitution was written, slaves existed in the United States, and that was amended and added to the Constitution when we freed the slaves. Same with women, we gave them the right to vote. So I don't understand why. I mean, it feels like it's a little bit of cherry picking going on, because the Constitution is constantly evolving and changing.
Well, but hold on, the First and Second Amendment have never changed.
Does that mean they can't?
Well, but we believe
have a ratification process.
Well, of course they can, but we think it shouldn't, and the fact that it hasn't is noteworthy. So, for example, we tried abolition of alcohol. The country didn't want it, and we got rid of it very quickly. So we've added amendments and gotten rid of them. Why has the First Amendment stood the test of time? Because we believe, as conservatives, the Constitution was not written for the times, but stand the test of time. Why? Because it was written to analyze human nature. And this is where leftists and conservatives would disagree. We think human nature is consistent over time, whereas leftists think that you're a creature of your environment and human nature changes based on the nuances and the complexities around you. So, for example, we believe that the right to be able to petition your government and speak is something that is eternal and should never change. Does that make sense?
Yeah, and when you refer to the First Amendment, are you talking about the right to speak freely, or are you talking about the right to religion?
Well, both. So there's two parts of the First Amendment, the Free Expression Clause and the Establishment Clause. So it is, you basically have the right to petition your government for grievances or redresses, and the government shall not create basically a state-run religion or the free exercise thereof. That is the original wording of the First Amendment.
So can I ask you how, if the government cannot create a national or state-run religion, when we have justices like Supreme Court Justice Clarence Thomas, who is making calls based off his Catholic beliefs, how is that not a violation of separation of church and state?
So first of all, separation of church and state is not in the First Amendment. You're gleaning that out of it. So that's actually a letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote in 1803 to the Danbury Baptist Convention, assuring the Baptists that the government would not come after them. So you're insinuating that that is the subtext of it. However, the Warren Court resurrected that letter and said it's separation of church and state. However, you would agree that we can never have separation of conscience or morality of state, right?
Can you elaborate?
For example, you have somebody who's an office holder. The values that undergird them are going to be reflected in their decisions, of course.
Absolutely.
Yeah, so that's what's happening with Clarence Thomas.
Yes.
No different than Joe Biden's Catholic values
So-
are what's representing his open border policies.
Yes, and speaking on the overturn of Roe v. Wade, when Clarence Thomas did he voted in favor to overturn that. Sure, you can use that argument there, but when it comes to him calling for the court to reevaluate same-sex marriage and things like that, contraception rights, can you tell me what kind of economic impact either of those things have on it? Like, it seems like a very
I don't
religious
want to get too deep in the weeds here. However, you'll never have
Yes.
separation of morality and state. And you've come up here in great faith, and I want to compliment you on that. You are wearing a Harris Wall sticker.
Yes.
I just one question. Can you tell me her greatest accomplishment?
Absolutely. So I think that Biden-Harris administration was in an unfortunate position when they came into office. It was, around the height of the COVID pandemic. And I wish I had exact numbers for you right now. I should have done more research on that. But the inflation rate has gone down since the height of COVID to now. And Donald Trump's, one of his biggest policies is imposing tariffs, right? Does anyone have the numbers? I'd be glad to.
First of all, let me just ask, do you guys feel inflation has come down at all? So, no, it's okay. So this is important. I'm not picking on you. But this is the problem with just overly studying what the economists say. The American people don't buy this garbage because they're feeling the pain every single day. And I just want to...
Yeah, here's the thing. On my channel, I'm not here to talk about what we feel because feelings can lie. Feelings change every day. They change every day. The fact is, inflation literally went down. Whether or not you feel it or don't feel it, it's obviously dependent on what city and what state you live in and the aggressiveness of the inflation that went up and down and where you're at. But factually, inflation went down. Also, when it comes to the vice president, because he was talking about Kamala Harris, this is an older video. The vice president typically isn't in the news much anyways. For example, right now, JD Vance isn't in the news much. You rarely hear what JD Vance is doing. Not saying he's not doing anything. He's obviously doing stuff, but it would take a very special type of person to know the accomplishments of the vice president who just typically doesn't even convey or put out their accomplishments. This is not a partisan thing I'm saying. This is just the truth. Nonetheless, let me know what you guys think about this video. My name is LFR Jojo, and I'll see you in the next one.